Nationwide says affordability is improving. Halifax says the house price-to-income ratio is at its lowest in over a decade. Skipton Building Society published a report this month, calling it a glimmer of hope. MoneyFacts said 2026 is setting up to be a fruitful year for first-time buyers. And you are still renting. You are still saving. You are still further from owning a home than you were 5 years ago. Every institution publishing data on first-time buyers says conditions are getting better. Every part of your actual life says they are not. The average first-time buyer in this country is now 34 years old. In the mid-90s, they were 29. 5 years. Not removed by a crash. Not removed by a recession. Removed by a system that moved the finish line while the buyer was running toward it. Skipton published that figure this month and buried it inside a report about how things are looking up. The headline said, "Glimmer of Hope." The data said the buyer is half a decade further from the starting line than the previous generation was. Under 25 home purchases have collapsed. In the mid-90s, nearly 1 in 4 property purchases were made by someone under 25. Today, it is 1 in 15. That is not a generation being gradually priced out. That is a generation being removed from the market entirely. For young adults on middle incomes, not the poorest, not the richest, the people in the middle homeownership fell from 65% to 27% in 20 years. The Institute for Fiscal Studies called it the sharpest collapse in a generation. And it was not at the bottom. It was in the exact income bracket that would have been homeowners in any previous generation. And it is not just the purchase that has been delayed. The proportion of first-time buyers with children has fallen from roughly a third to just over a quarter in the last 10 years. People are not choosing to wait longer to start families. They are being forced to choose between a deposit and a child, between a savings target and a life. That is not a market statistic. That is a decision nobody should have to make, being made by an entire generation quietly, without headlines, while the institutions publishing the data call it progress. And that is before a single number about what it actually costs to get in. Buyers are lowering their expectations. They are moving further out. They are compromising on size, on condition, on location. 2/3 of all first-time buyer purchases in December were for properties under £300,000. Not because buyers want smaller homes in cheaper areas, because smaller homes in cheaper areas are all they can reach. It takes 6 years to save a 10% deposit on a typical first-time buyer property in this country. 6 years, and that is the national average. In London, it is 9. Think about what 9 years of saving means. A child born the year the buyer started putting money aside would be in secondary school by the time that deposit was ready. 9 years of watching the number in a savings account inch upward while the price of the thing it is supposed to buy moves further away. And every one of those 9 years, the buyer was also paying rent that rose year on year, consuming the money that was supposed to become the deposit. The average first-time buyer deposit in London is now over £150,000. That is not a deposit, that is a salary, multiple years of a salary. For a single payment, that gets the buyer to the starting line, not across it. And the buyer trying to save that deposit is doing it while paying rent that has not stopped rising. Average rents in England increased to over £1,400 a month in the year to January 2026. The buyer is not saving in a vacuum. They are saving while the rent takes more every year. The deposit gets further away while they are walking toward it. More than half of first-time buyers now need 2 full-time salaries to qualify for a mortgage. Nearly 1 in 3 deposits are funded by gifts from family. 1 in 10 come from inheritances. First-time buyers who receive help from family buy at the age of 30. Those who do not are typically 32 or older. The bank of mom and dad is not a quirk of the market. It is the market. Family help nearly doubles the average deposit a buyer can put down. The buyer whose parents cannot write that check is not just behind. They are in a different race entirely, one with a longer timeline, a higher rate, and a smaller home at the end of it. And even the buyers who get there are finding out that qualifying for the mortgage is a different problem entirely. The average mortgage term for a first-time buyer was 25 years in 2005. It is 31 years now. 6 years added to a lifetime of debt in 2 decades, and it is still rising. Over half of all first-time buyers now take a mortgage of 30 years or more. 1 in 5 take 35 to 40 years. A generation ago, that would have been unthinkable. Now it is the standard route onto the ladder. A buyer who is 34 today, the average age, and takes a 40-year mortgage will make the final payment at 74, a decade past state pension age. Still paying for a home they bought in their 30s. Still carrying a debt that started because the price of the house was too high for a shorter term. Their parents bought on a 25-year term and were mortgage-free before they turned 55. The buyer watching this will not be mortgage-free before their grandchildren are born. Monthly mortgage payments now consume 36% of take-home pay for a typical first-time buyer. The long-run average is 30%. That gap does not sound large as a percentage. In a monthly budget, it is the difference between managing and rationing, between putting something aside and spending everything that comes in. It is the holiday that does not happen, the car repair that goes on a credit card, the pension contribution that gets skipped because the mortgage comes first. Buyers are not choosing longer terms because they want to. They are choosing them because the affordability calculator will not approve them on anything shorter. The lender is not approving a home. The lender is approving a debt that runs into the buyer's 70s and calling it access to the property ladder. The only way a buyer qualifies today is by agreeing to a debt that follows them into retirement. And nobody made that decision alone. 3 specific decisions put them here. On the 1st of April 2025, Rachel Reeves cut the first-time buyer stamp duty threshold from £425,000 to £300,000. Before that date, a first-time buyer purchasing at £400,000 paid nothing in stamp duty. After it, they paid £5,000. The property did not change. Their income did not change. A line was moved in a budget document, and £5,000 was added to the cost of buying a home. Before that change, 21% of first-time buyers paid stamp duty. After it, that figure doubled to 42%. The buyer's deposit did not shrink. The threshold moved. The money they had saved was no longer enough, not because they saved too little, but because a political decision reached into their budget and took it. The buyer who had been saving for 6 years and was finally ready to move watched £5,000 disappear from their plan overnight. Not because of the market, because of a line in a budget. The government promised 1.5 million new homes this Parliament. As of January 2026, 309,600 had been added. Full Fact rated the pledge as off track. At the current rate of building, it would take nearly 6 more years to meet the target, longer than the Parliament itself. Savills forecasts completions of 160,000 to 170,000 homes annually for the foreseeable future. The target requires 300,000. Affordable housing starts fell 12% year-on-year in the 6 months to September 2025. Social rent starts fell 38%. The homes that would have been affordable for the buyer watching this are the ones being cut the fastest. The buyer was told help was coming, that the supply would catch up. That building would bring prices within reach. The homes are not being built. The affordable homes are being built even more slowly than the rest. Every home that is not built is a buyer who stays renting. Every affordable unit that is cut is a family that stays in temporary accommodation or a flat they have outgrown. And the buyer who was waiting for supply to arrive has watched another year pass in a rental that costs more than the mortgage they cannot get approved for. And while the homes were not being built and the threshold was being raised, the mortgage industry found its own answer to unaffordable prices. It did not lower them. It did not build more. It let the buyer borrow for longer. A first-time buyer mortgage of 25 years became unaffordable, so the industry created the 30-year mortgage, then the 35, then the 40. The buyer pays more in total over the life of the loan. The lender earns more in interest. The price stays exactly where it is. Nothing was fixed. The debt was extended and the cost was moved from the price of the house to the length of the buyer's working life. The buyer does not get a cheaper home. They get a longer chain around their neck. And they are told to be grateful for the access. 3 decisions. A threshold cut that added thousands to the cost of entry. A building promise that is not being kept. A mortgage industry that answered unaffordable prices by making the debt longer. None of them were the buyer's decision. All of them landed on the buyer. If you are about to make an offer, model your stamp duty at the current threshold before you commit. If you built your budget before April 2025, it no longer applies. The threshold moved. Your plan needs to move with it. Factor the full cost before you sign anything. If you are still building a deposit and waiting for conditions to improve, model the timeline honestly. The deposit target is not falling. The mortgage term is stretching. The homes that were promised are not being built. Every year, the finish line moves, and waiting is not free. The cost of another year is not zero. It is another year of rent that could have been a mortgage payment, another year of prices that did not fall far enough, another year of a threshold that did not move back. Every institution publishing data on first-time buyers is telling the same story. Conditions are improving, affordability is better, the outlook is positive. And every buyer watching this knows that is not what their life looks like. The data improved. Their lives did not. That is the gap between what is being published and what is being lived, and nobody is saying it plainly. Rachel Reeves raised the cost of entry. The government broke its promise to build, and the mortgage industry extended the debt into retirement, and then the headlines called it progress. Subscribe to the channel, because the data they are publishing and the data you are living are not the same. This channel covers the difference.